The promotion email arrived while Stephen was teaching me to change my oil. He had me on my back under my Honda, explaining about drain plugs and filter wrenches, when my phone buzzed with the news that would eventually destroy us. Senior Marketing Director. $120,000 a year. Nearly double what I'd been making. Triple what Stephen made teaching high school history. "You got it?" he asked, seeing my face as I slid out from under the car. "I got it," I said, still staring at the screen like it might disappear. He lifted me off the ground in a hug that left oil stains on my clothes, spinning me around his parents' driveway while whooping loud enough to wake the neighbors. Pure joy on his face, not a hint of the jealousy I'd expected. The pride in his eyes made me uncomfortable for reasons I wouldn't understand until later. "We have to celebrate," he said. "Dinner tonight, somewhere fancy, my treat." My treat. Those words would become a problem, though neither of us knew it yet. Stephen had been treating since we met 2 years ago. Nothing extravagant, just the careful generosity of a teacher's salary. Pizza nights, movie tickets, flowers from the grocery store. I'd always appreciated it, always offered to split, always been secretly relieved when he insisted on paying. Now I'd be making more than him. A lot more. The math sat between us like a third person as we went inside to clean up. "This is huge, Brooke," he said, scrubbing oil from his hands at the kitchen sink. "You've worked so hard for this. Remember when you started as an intern, making coffee and filing papers?" 5 years ago, I said, though it felt like another lifetime. Another person. The girl who'd been grateful for a $15 an hour internship wouldn't recognize the woman being offered 6 figures. "And now you're running the whole department." He turned to me, dish towel in hand, that teacher's pride still shining. "I'm so proud of you." "I'm so proud of you." Not we're going to be rich, not think of what this means for us, just pride, like I was one of his students who'd finally passed a difficult test. "Thanks," I said, already feeling the distance that paycheck would create. Dinner was at Antonio's, the Italian place we'd gone for our anniversary. Stephen wore his good jacket, the one he saved for parent-teacher conferences and special occasions. I noticed for the first time how the cuffs were slightly frayed, how the shoulders didn't quite fit right. When had I started noticing these things? "To Brooke," he toasted, raising his glass of the house red. "The smartest, most driven woman I know. Sky's the limit now." We clinked glasses, but I was already calculating. The wine was $20. Our entrees, maybe 30 each. The kind of math you do when money's tight. The kind I'd never have to do again. "So what's first?" he asked. "New apartment? Vacation? You've been talking about wanting a real couch forever." "I don't know," I said, though I'd already been browsing listings in better neighborhoods, places with doormen and gym facilities, places that cost more than Stephen's monthly take-home. "Well, whatever you decide, I'm here for it. Your success is my success, right?" Right, except it wasn't, not really. My success was mine, earned in conference rooms he'd never see, with people he'd never meet, in a language he didn't speak. His success was measured in different metrics. Students who came back to visit, thank you notes from parents, the slow-burn satisfaction of changing lives one lesson at a time. The changes started small. I bought new work clothes first, justifying it as investment in my image. Designer suits that cost more than Stephen spent on his entire wardrobe. Shoes that clicked authority on marble lobbies. A watch that whispered success in meetings. "You look like a CEO," Stephen said one morning, watching me get ready. He was still in his pajamas, grading papers over coffee. "Very power suit." "It's just clothes," I said, but we both knew it wasn't. It was armor. It was distance measured in thread count and brand names. I started working later, coming home after Stephen had already eaten dinner, something simple he'd made for both of us. My portion wrapped in the fridge with a note. Always a note. "Congrats on the Henderson account," or "saved you the last piece of garlic bread," or just "love you" in his teacher's handwriting. One night I came home to find him asleep on the couch, my plate still warming in the oven. He'd waited up again, despite my telling him not to. There was a new stack of papers beside him, student essays about their heroes. I glanced at one. A girl had written about her mom who worked 3 jobs. The earnestness of it, the careful 5th-grade handwriting, the way Stephen had written "beautiful job" in the margin, all of it suddenly infuriated me. "You don't have to cook for me," I said, louder than necessary, startling him awake. "I like cooking for you," he said, rubbing his eyes. "How was your day?" "Productive. Closed a $2 million account. Hired 3 new strategists. Real work," I said, and watched it land like a slap. The words hung there. Real work. As if what he did wasn't real. "That's great," he said, either missing or ignoring the insult. "Want to hear about the kid who finally—" "Not really," I cut him off. "I'm tired of kid stories, Stephen. Don't you have anything else to talk about?" His face closed off. "Sure, what would you like to discuss? Market trends, portfolio diversification?" "Don't be snide." "I'm not. I'm trying to figure out what qualifies as acceptable conversation now that my actual life bores you." "Maybe if your life was bigger than a classroom." "My life includes you," he said quietly. Or it used to. The apartment issue forced our first real confrontation. I'd been looking without telling him, touring places during lunch breaks, imagining myself in floor-to-ceiling windows and chef's kitchens. When I finally showed him the listing for a downtown loft, $2,500 a month, utilities not included, his face went carefully blank. "That's a lot," he said. "I can afford it now," I said. "What about our place?" Our place. A 2-bedroom in Oak Park we'd been sharing for a year. Comfortable, affordable, close to his school. Everything the loft wasn't. "I thought you'd want to move in with me," I said, though I'd been hoping he wouldn't. Already imagining my new life uncluttered by graded papers and teacher's editions. To downtown, my commute would be over an hour. "So, my commute now is 45 minutes. "Right, but—" He paused, choosing words carefully like he did with struggling students. "You have a car, I take the bus, and that rent is more than I make in a month." I said I can afford it. "By yourself, but if we're living together, shouldn't we both contribute?" "Why?" The question came out sharper than intended. I stepped away from him without realizing it, already picturing the skyline view from my future balcony. "Why does it matter who pays if we can afford it?" "Because it matters to me," he said quietly. "I don't want to be kept. Like he was some kind of pet I'd feed and house. The ugliness of the word sat between us. "That's not what this is," I said. "Isn't it? You pay the rent, buy the groceries, handle the bills. What do I contribute?" "You contribute plenty," I said, but my tone suggested otherwise. What did he contribute really? His teacher's salary that couldn't cover 1/3 of the rent? His stories about 6th graders? His contentment with less when I was reaching for more? The first public humiliation was at Morton's Steakhouse. Stephen had insisted on picking me up, his ancient Civic wheezing into the valet zone. My colleagues watched through the window as he got out in his khakis and polo shirt, his nice dinner outfit, to open my door. "That's your boyfriend?" Melissa from accounting asked, not bothering to hide her amusement. "He's so wholesome." "He's a teacher," I said, that apologetic tone already creeping in. When he joined us, earnest and excited to meet my coworkers, the contrast was excruciating. They discussed vacation homes and investment strategies, while Stephen contributed a story about taking his students to the Science Museum on a rented school bus that broke down twice. My boyfriend, the teacher, I thought, cringing internally. My boyfriend who thought a broken-down school bus belonged in boardroom conversation. "That must have been quite an adventure," my boss Patricia said, in the voice people use with children. "The kids loved it," Stephen said, missing her condescension entirely. "Turned it into a lesson about problem-solving." "How resourceful," someone murmured, and I saw the smirks, the eye rolls, the unspoken judgment. "Stephen was just leaving," I said abruptly. "Weren't you? Early morning tomorrow?" His face registered the dismissal, the lie. Tomorrow was Saturday. But he took it with grace, the way he took everything. "Right, nice meeting everyone." He kissed my cheek, and I turned slightly so his lips landed closer to my ear. "See you at home?" "Actually, I might stay out. Don't wait up." After he left, the table relaxed. "He seems nice," Patricia said, which was worse than mockery. "Very stable." Stable, I thought. Another word for boring. Another word for small. That night, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Lipstick perfect. Designer dress pristine. A stranger staring back at me. The housewarming party was even worse. By then, I'd been in my new apartment for a month, and Stephen looked increasingly out of place every time he visited. I'd invited my work friends and his teacher colleagues, telling myself I was trying to blend our worlds, but oil and water would have mixed better. "So you teach 6th grade?" my assistant Caroline asked Stephen's friend Mike, saying 6th grade like it was a communicable disease. "5th, actually," Mike said cheerfully. "Best age. They still think learning is cool." "How sweet," Caroline said, already looking for someone more important to talk to. I watched Stephen's colleagues cluster together, intimidated by my apartment, touching things carefully like they might break. Janet, who taught art, kept nervously adjusting her Target dress, while my coworkers swept past in designer clothes. "Your teacher friends are precious," Patricia murmured to me. "Like watching National Geographic, teachers in their natural habitat." I laughed. God help me. I laughed while Stephen was across the room explaining the importance of public education to my Harvard MBA colleague who was checking his phone. Why does he have to be so earnest? I thought. Why can't he just once pretend to be something more than a 5th grade teacher? Stephen spent most of the party in the kitchen, refilling drinks, making sure everyone had food, playing host in my apartment like he belonged there, when increasingly he looked like the help. The final straw came a week later at my company's planning meeting for our annual charity auction. "We need more donations," Patricia said. "Something unique, experiential." "Stephen could offer tutoring sessions," I heard myself say. "Your boyfriend, the teacher?" Patricia perked up. "That's perfect, very on brand for us, supporting education and all that." "Actually," I said, the words coming from somewhere cruel and calculating, "he could tutor executives' children, private sessions, help them get into elite schools." It was a betrayal of everything Stephen believed in. He tutored kids for free at the community center, believed education should be equally accessible. But I packaged his passion as a luxury good, something for rich parents to buy. When I told him that night, he was grading papers at my $8,000 dining table, the table where he looked increasingly out of place. "A charity auction?" He looked up, confused. "What would I auction? Tutoring sessions, private ones for donors' kids?" "But I already tutor for free at—" "This is different," I interrupted. "These are important people. Their children go to prep schools. It would be good exposure for you." "Exposure to what?" "Better opportunities. You could build a private client base, make real money for once." The words hung between us. Real money, for once. As if his teacher's salary was play money, as if his work was a hobby he'd failed to monetize. "I don't want to tutor rich kids for money," he said carefully. "That's not why I teach." "Of course not," I said, my tone suggesting he was naive. "You teach for the glory of $35,000 a year and the privilege of buying your own classroom supplies." "I teach because it matters," he said, voice hardening. "Because those kids need someone who believes in them." "How noble," I said, mimicking Patricia's tone. "How very precious and sweet." He stared at me. "When did you become this person?" "When I stopped settling for less," I shot back. When I realized there's a whole world outside your classroom where people actually achieve things. My kids achieve things. Your kids achieve 5th grade reading levels. Congratulations. Meanwhile, I'm achieving actual success, and you're making me look bad by association. The silence that followed was deafening. Stephen carefully set down his red pen, stacked the papers he'd been grading, progress reports he'd spent all weekend personalizing with encouraging notes, and stood up. "You're right," he said quietly. "I am making you look bad. A teacher dating a marketing director. How embarrassing for you." "Stephen, no, I get it now. All those little comments, the way you introduce me, the way you've stopped coming to school events. You're ashamed of me." "I'm not ashamed. You literally just said I make you look bad by association. You want to auction off what I do like it's a commodity. You see my salary as play money. You think my work is cute, like Patricia said, precious and sweet but not real achievement." He gathered his things methodically. The papers, his ancient laptop, the coffee mug I'd bought him that said "World's Best Teacher" back when I'd meant it. "For what it's worth," he said at the door, "I never thought you were settling. I thought we were building something together. But you weren't building with me. You were just waiting for something better to come along. Better apartment, better furniture, better boyfriend. And now you have the first two, so it's time to upgrade the third." "That's not, I turned down Preston Academy," he said quietly. $90,000 a year to teach rich kids. Turned it down because my kids in Oak Park need me more. Because there's a boy named Marcus who can't afford glasses, and a girl named Aisha who's brilliant but doesn't know it yet. Because that matters more than money. My mouth opened, but no words came. "But you're right," he continued. "That probably does make me look bad by association. The teacher who chose poor kids over a prestigious salary. How embarrassing for you at Morton's. How small I must seem at your parties. How precious and sweet and ultimately worthless." He left then, closing the door with quiet finality. I stood in my expensive apartment, surrounded by everything I'd thought I wanted, finally free of the man who'd held me back with his small dreams and teacher's salary. Except I wasn't free. I was just alone. I threw myself into work after that. 60-hour weeks, weekend conferences, climbing higher on a ladder that never seemed to reach anywhere. Dated men in my new tax bracket, lawyers, executives, entrepreneurs who understood ambition and measured worth in stock portfolios. They were perfectly suitable, perfectly boring. They talked about market volatility over dinners that cost more than Stephen's weekly groceries. They had the right watches, the right cars, the right addresses. They never once made me laugh until wine came out my nose. Never knew how I took my coffee without asking. Never left notes on my pillow, or danced with me in the kitchen or looked at me like I was magic, even in sweatpants. I ran into Stephen a year later at a bookstore in Oak Park. I was back visiting the old neighborhood, trying to remember why I'd been so eager to leave it. He was in the children's section, helping a kid pick out books, still wearing teacher casual, still radiating that patience I'd mistaken for lack of ambition. "Brooke," he said, surprised but not unhappy. "You look well." "Well, corporate, expensive, empty." "Thanks, you too." And he did look well, the same but lighter somehow, unburdened by someone who'd made him feel small. His shirt was wrinkled, his shoes worn, and he looked more fulfilled than anyone I'd met in a boardroom. "Ms. Henderson," a voice piped up, a young girl, maybe 12, bouncing over to us. "Is this your girlfriend, the one in the photo?" "No, Aisha," Stephen said gently. "This is an old friend. Brooke, this is Aisha, one of my students from last year." "The best student," Aisha corrected. "Mr. H, did you tell her about the writing contest?" "I didn't. I won," Aisha interrupted. "The whole state competition, and Mr. H helped me with my essay and came to the ceremony and everything. He even drove 3 hours on a Saturday because my mom couldn't get off work. He used his own gas money and everything." The pride on Stephen's face was radiant. The same look he'd given me when I got promoted, but somehow purer. This wasn't about money or status. This was about changing a life, about mattering in ways that couldn't be measured in salary. The essay was about heroes, Aisha continued. I wrote about Mr. H, how he stays after school to help kids like me who struggle with reading, how he bought Marcus glasses when his family couldn't afford them, how he makes us believe we're smart, even when other people say we're not. Aisha, Stephen tried to interrupt, embarrassed by the praise. It's true, she turned to me. He's the best teacher in the whole school, maybe the whole world. Did you know he turned down a job at Preston Academy because he said we needed him more? Preston Academy, the elite private school where teachers made double the public school salary. He'd never mentioned it. That's wonderful, I said, meaning it, feeling the weight of what I'd thrown away. Mr. H is why I want to be a teacher, Aisha continued. Even though my aunt says teachers don't make money, Mr. H says making a difference matters more than making money. Stephen's eyes met mine at that. A whole conversation in a glance. Come on, Aisha, he said. Your mom's waiting. Nice to meet you, Aisha said to me. Then, to Stephen, she's pretty, Mr. H, but not as pretty as Ms. Kim. They left me standing in the children's section, surrounded by books about possibility. Ms. Kim. Stephen had someone new. Someone who presumably didn't make him feel like his dreams were too small. That night, I looked up Preston Academy. Found the job posting from last year. Department head position. $90,000. Benefits. Prestige. Everything I'd accused Stephen of not wanting. He'd turned it down to keep teaching kids like Aisha, kids who needed him more than he needed money. Then I looked up his school's website. Found a newsletter featuring him. Teacher of the Year for the 3rd time. Photos of him with his students, all of them beaming. A quote from him. Every child deserves someone who believes in their potential. That's worth more than any paycheck. One photo showed him at what looked like a wedding. Ms. Kim, presumably. The school's music teacher, according to the caption. They were dancing. Him in the same suit he'd worn to my housewarming party. Her in a simple dress, both of them glowing with the kind of joy money can't buy. I closed my laptop and looked around my expensive apartment, the one I'd chosen over love. The furniture that cost more than Stephen made in months. The art on the walls that impressed clients but meant nothing to me. The space designed to announce success to everyone but too empty to call home. My bank account was full, my calendar packed with important meetings, my business cards embossed with a title that commanded respect. I had everything I'd thought I wanted when Stephen was teaching me to change oil in his parents' driveway, when his pride in my success felt suffocating instead of supportive. But Aisha had more than me. She had a hero. She had someone who drove 3 hours on a Saturday with his own gas money to watch her win a contest. She had a teacher who saw her potential when others saw limitations. She had what I'd had and thrown away, someone who measured worth in impact, not income. I bought a book that day. Oh, The Places You'll Go. Not for any child, but for myself. A reminder that climbing high doesn't mean much if you're climbing alone, that success measured only in dollars is the smallest kind of success there is. My name is Brooke, and I made more money and lost more than I gained. I convinced myself that ambition meant leaving behind anyone who wasn't climbing as fast as me. That love was less important than leather furniture and doorman buildings. That a teacher's pride in his students was worth less than my pride in my salary. Stephen still teaches 5th grade, still makes less than my monthly clothing budget, still changes lives one lesson at a time. He found someone who sees that as success, who doesn't measure his worth in dollars or make him feel small for choosing meaning over money. I make even more now. Senior vice president, corner office, 6 figures plus bonuses. I can afford anything except what I had. Someone who loved me before I could afford anything. Someone who celebrated my success without being diminished by it. Someone I diminished anyway, because I'd learned to measure worth in all the wrong currencies. The ladder I climbed led me to a penthouse view of the life I rejected. Stephen's classroom might have a view of the parking lot, but from there, he can see futures changing. All I can see is how far I've climbed above everyone who used to matter. The view from up here is spectacular, and spectacularly lonely, which is what happens when you mistake making more money for becoming more valuable, and forget that the best things in life, love, respect, partnership, have never been for sale.